By the time Marcus Reed sat alone in that hospital waiting room, he understood something that had taken 2 years to learn. 2 years, 3 states, and 1 phone call that changed everything. You can outrun a marriage. You can outrun a mortgage. You can outrun the version of yourself that disappointed people at dinner tables. The version that forgot anniversaries. The version that checked his phone while his daughter was talking. But you cannot outrun the moment you finally understand what you have done. That moment was coming for Marcus. It always was. He just did not know it would find him in a hospital waiting room in Tucson, Arizona, at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. He was wearing the same jacket he had left home in, because he never went back for the rest of his things. This is his story, and it does not go where you think it is going. His name was Marcus Allen Reed. He was 41 years old, a civil engineer, a youth soccer coach on Saturdays, the man who grilled on Sundays, the son who called his mother every other Thursday. By every outside measurement, Marcus Reed had built a real life. He had a wife named Diane, 13 years of marriage. Diane was a pediatric nurse. She came home smelling faintly of antiseptic, and somehow still found the strength to make sure their daughter had dinner. And a parent who listened. They had a daughter named Lily. She was 9 years old. She had a gap between her front teeth, and a laugh that could fill a parking lot. She called him Dad with a particular emphasis, as if the word meant something sacred, something only she understood. Marcus had a 3-bedroom house in Madison, Wisconsin, a back porch he had built himself over one long summer, a dog named Cooper who slept at the foot of his side of the bed, and never failed to greet him at the door. He had everything, and he left it. On a Tuesday morning in October, he packed 1 bag, wrote a note that was 11 words long, then drove away while Diane was at work, while Lily was at school, and while Cooper slept in a patch of sunlight on the kitchen floor. 11 words. I'm sorry. I need to figure out who I am. Please don't hate me. That was it. That was all he gave them. Now, before you decide how you feel about Marcus Reed, stay with me, because the easy thing to do is make him the villain of this story. And I understand that, but the truth is more complicated. It usually is. If you have ever stood at the edge of your own life and felt like a stranger inside it, then some part of what Marcus was carrying may make a painful kind of sense. Not because he was right, but because he was human. So let me take you back. Not to the Tuesday morning he left. Further back than that. Back to where the leaving actually started. Because it did not begin with a packed bag. It did not begin with the note. And it did not begin on a Tuesday morning in October. It began much earlier, in a driveway, with the kitchen light on, and a man who could not make himself go inside. The leaving did not begin on a Tuesday morning in October. It began almost 3 years earlier. On an ordinary Friday evening, Marcus Reed pulled into the driveway just after 6. He turned off the engine. The headlights faded across the garage door. Inside the house, the kitchen light was already on. He could see movement through the window. Diane was cooking dinner. Lily was setting the table. It looked exactly like home, exactly like every evening that had come before it. Marcus should have felt relief. Instead, he sat there. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. By the time he finally looked at the dashboard clock again, 45 minutes had disappeared. He never opened the car door. He simply sat there, staring at the warm light coming through the kitchen window. Years later, Marcus would say he spent a long time trying to describe what he felt in that driveway. Stress wasn't the right word. Neither was exhaustion. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't unhappiness. The closest word he ever found was dread. Not dread of Diane. He loved Diane. Not dread of Lily. She was the brightest part of his life. Not dread of the house, or the mortgage, or the responsibilities waiting inside. It was something much quieter, and much harder to explain. He had done everything he believed a good man was supposed to do. He had built a career, built a marriage, built a home with his own hands, built a family. He had reached the destination he had been working toward since his 20s. Yet sitting there in the fading light, he found himself asking a question that terrified him. Is this it? Is this the life I've been building toward? Questions like that rarely arrive all at once. They arrive quietly. They sit beside you in the driver's seat. They wait until life becomes still enough to be heard. And if you are already exhausted, they can begin to sound like truth. Marcus didn't know it then, but there is a dangerous difference between being unhappy with your life and being disconnected from yourself. One can sometimes look exactly like the other. He would spend the next 2 years learning that difference, at a cost he could never recover. Eventually, Marcus picked up his keys. He walked inside. He kissed Diane on the cheek, helped Lily with her spelling homework, laughed at something Cooper did in the kitchen. They ate dinner together, talked about school, talked about work, talked about the neighbors replacing their fence. To anyone watching, it was an ordinary family evening. No raised voices, no arguments, no obvious cracks. But something had already changed. Not inside the house, inside Marcus. Because that night, he carried something through the front door that no one else could see. A question he never spoke aloud, a fear he never admitted, a loneliness he could not explain. He went to bed beside his wife, closed his eyes, and said nothing. That silence became the first brick. Over the months that followed, he would lay hundreds more, brick by brick, until one day he could no longer see the people standing on the other side. Marcus believed the silence was protecting his family. He had no idea it was quietly becoming the very thing that would destroy the life he was trying to protect. Over the next 18 months, Marcus Reed became a man who was always present and somehow completely absent. He never missed Lily's soccer games. He was there for every school concert, every parent-teacher meeting, every family barbecue, every birthday, every ordinary Saturday morning. From the outside, nothing had changed. He still cut the grass on weekends, still fixed things around the house, still laughed at the right moments, still kissed Diane goodbye before work. Anyone looking at the Reed family would have seen exactly what Marcus wanted them to see. A husband, a father, a good man. But the people who loved him most had begun to notice something that couldn't be photographed. His body was in the room. His mind was somewhere else. Diane noticed first. Of course she did. She spent her days caring for children who often couldn't explain what hurt. She had learned to read the smallest changes, the hesitation before an answer, the smile that arrived a second too late, the silence that didn't belong. She saw those same signs in her husband. The first conversation happened one Sunday evening after Lily had gone to bed. The dishes were finished. The television was off. The house was quiet. Diane looked across the table and asked a simple question. "Marcus, are you okay?" He smiled. The kind of smile people wear when they want a conversation to end before it begins. "I'm just tired." She accepted the answer. For a while. A few months later, she asked again. This time, while they folded laundry together. "You're here," she said softly. "But you're not really here anymore." Marcus looked down at the towel in his hands. "I've just got a lot going on at work." She nodded. Not because she believed him, because she knew he wasn't ready to tell the truth. The third conversation came late one evening. Rain tapped gently against the kitchen window. Lily was already asleep upstairs. Cooper lay stretched across the floor between them. Diane didn't ask what was wrong this time. She asked something different. She reached across the table, placed her hand over his, and said, "I don't know how to help you if you won't let me see what's hurting." Marcus opened his mouth. He wanted to answer. He wanted to tell her about the driveway, about the dread, about the feeling that had no name, about waking every morning feeling like he was watching someone else live his life. Instead, he said the words that had become his hiding place. "I'm fine." There was a long silence. Then Diane slowly withdrew her hand. She looked at him for several seconds, not with anger, not with disappointment, with sadness. The quiet sadness of someone realizing they were standing outside a locked door. And finally, she stopped knocking. Marcus watched her stand up, carry the folded towels upstairs, and disappear around the corner. Years later, that moment would haunt him more than the morning he left. Because that was the moment someone who loved him offered to carry part of his burden, and he chose to carry it alone. Lily noticed too. Children rarely understand the reasons adults change, but they almost always notice that they have. She started finding excuses to stay close to him. She drew pictures at the kitchen table while he drank his coffee. She followed him into the garage while he worked. She sat quietly beside him on the back porch, without saying very much. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply trying to close a distance she couldn't explain. Marcus noticed every one of those moments. He loved having her there. He smiled. He hugged her. He listened when she spoke, but he never crossed the invisible distance inside himself. Looking back, that may have been the hardest part. Marcus wasn't a cruel father. He wasn't abusive. He wasn't addicted to alcohol. He wasn't gambling away the family's future. He wasn't living a secret double life. He was something much more difficult to recognize. He was disappearing while standing in the middle of the people who loved him most. And because disappearing happens quietly, no one knew how close they were to losing him. Marcus believed he still had time. Time to explain. Time to fix himself. Time to come back. He was about to discover that life rarely waits for people who keep saying, "Not yet." The note took Marcus Reed 40 minutes to write, not because he didn't know what he wanted to say, because he knew there was no combination of words that could make what he was about to do understandable. He began with 4 full pages. He wrote about the driveway, about the feeling he had carried for nearly 3 years, about waking up every morning feeling like he was watching someone else's life from inside his own. He wrote about the fear he couldn't explain, about the shame of not understanding himself, about the guilt of becoming a stranger while still sitting at his own dinner table. Some sentences were honest, some were selfish. Most were both at the same time. When he finished, he read every page. Then he folded them carefully, placed them inside his jacket pocket, and started again. This time, he wrote only 11 words. "I'm sorry. I need to figure out who I am. Please don't hate me." That was all. He left the note on the kitchen counter, beside the fruit bowl, exactly where Diane would see it when she came home from work. It was a Tuesday morning in October. Diane had already left for her shift at the children's hospital. Lily was already at school. The house was unusually quiet. Cooper was asleep in a patch of sunlight near the back door. Marcus stood in the kitchen for a long time. He looked around the room. The refrigerator was covered with drawings Lily had made over the years. One was beginning to curl at the edges. Another had slipped slightly beneath a family photograph held up by a small magnet. A spelling test with a gold star was still pinned beside the calendar. Normal things, ordinary things, the kind of things people stop seeing because they are always there. Marcus noticed every one of them. He picked up his duffel bag, walked to the front door, then stopped. For just a moment, he almost turned around. Years later, he would often think about those few seconds. Not because they changed anything, because they could have. He reached for the doorknob, opened the door, stepped outside, closed it quietly behind him. Cooper never woke up. Marcus placed his bag in the truck, started the engine, and drove away from the only home his daughter had ever known. He kept driving west. By nightfall, he reached Indianapolis. He parked outside a roadside diner but never went inside. Instead, he bought a sandwich from a gas station across the street, sat alone in the truck, and watched people come and go through the restaurant windows. Families, couples, truck drivers laughing over coffee, a little girl asleep against her father's shoulder. He looked away. His phone vibrated again, and again, and again. By 9 o'clock that evening, there were 47 missed calls. Diane, his mother, friends, neighbors, numbers he didn't recognize. He looked at the screen for a long time. Then, he switched the phone off, placed it carefully inside the glove compartment, closed it. The following morning, he bought a new phone with a new number. From that moment forward, Marcus Reed became Alan Reed. Half a name, half a life. He told himself he wasn't running away. He was searching for something, searching for peace, searching for clarity, searching for himself. He believed those things because believing them hurt less than admitting the truth. The truth was much simpler. He had left the people who loved him without giving them the chance to help carry what he was carrying. He believed distance would answer questions that honesty never had the opportunity to ask. It wouldn't, not even close. Marcus believed the hardest part was over. He had finally left. What he didn't know was that freedom would become the loneliest place he had ever lived. Marcus expected freedom to feel different. He imagined waking up lighter, breathing easier, sleeping without the weight he had carried for so long. He believed that somewhere beyond the horizon, a different version of himself was waiting. Someone calmer, someone happier, someone he had somehow lost along the way. For the first few days, it almost felt true. He reached St. Louis on the second evening, found a small motel that rented rooms by the month. The place overlooked an old industrial district near the river. Nothing about it felt permanent, which suited him. He introduced himself as Alan Reed, used his middle name, kept conversations short, found temporary work with a small construction company doing site assessments. His qualifications opened doors. His silence kept people from asking questions. For 11 days, life became astonishingly simple. He woke up when he wanted, ate alone, worked, came back to the motel, watched television, went to sleep. No responsibilities, no school pickups, no mortgage, no conversations waiting at the dinner table. It was exactly the life he thought he wanted, until the 11th night. Marcus woke suddenly, just after 3 a.m. He had dreamed about Lily. He reached for his phone. There was a short video online, something funny, the kind of thing Lily would have laughed at until she couldn't breathe. Without thinking, his thumb searched for her name. Then he stopped. There was no number to send it to anymore. He had erased that life himself. The room became painfully quiet. Marcus lay awake for hours, staring at a water stain on the motel ceiling. It reminded him of the shape of Michigan. He never forgot that. Funny, the details the mind decides to keep. The next morning, he convinced himself it had only been a difficult night. He needed more time, that was all. More distance, more space. The freedom still hadn't had a chance to work. So he kept driving. 3 months later, Marcus was living in Kansas City. The apartment was better, the job paid more. He had started running every morning along the river before work. 8 miles, sometimes 12. His body grew stronger. His life became healthier. Everything looked better, except him, because the silence he had wanted so badly had become unbearable. There is a loneliness that finds people unexpectedly. And then there is the loneliness we build ourselves. Brick by brick, choice by choice. Marcus had built his own. Every evening he unlocked the apartment door. Every evening the room greeted him exactly as he had left it. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. No shoes by the hallway. No homework on the kitchen table. No voice calling from another room. No dog scratching gently at the door. He had wanted peace. Instead, he had found absence. He started running longer distances, not because he loved running, because exhaustion was easier than thinking. Then he bought a notebook. At first, he filled it with ordinary things, work schedules, shopping lists, places he wanted to visit. But gradually, the writing changed. The pages became questions. Who am I when I am nobody's husband? Who am I when no one is waiting for me? Who was I before everyone needed something from me? He filled 3 notebooks, searching for answers. Slowly, one uncomfortable truth began to emerge. Marcus realized he genuinely did not know who he was beneath the roles he had spent his entire adult life performing. Son, engineer, husband, father, provider. He had become so committed to fulfilling those roles that he had forgotten to ask who was standing underneath them. That discovery was real. It mattered. But Marcus was learning the right lesson in the worst possible way, because discovering yourself never required abandoning the people who loved you. He could have asked for help. He could have spoken to Diane. He could have gone to therapy. He could have admitted, I don't know what's happening to me. Instead, he drove across America searching for an answer that had never left his own house. Every mile he traveled taught him something, but every mile also cost someone else. Diane carried the weight alone. Lily learned to stop asking questions. His mother waited beside a telephone that rang less and less. Marcus thought he was paying the price for his journey. He wasn't. His family was paying it with him, and they had never agreed to the trip. If this story is finding something inside you, whether you've been the one who left or the one who stayed, take a second to subscribe. Digital Shadows isn't just about stories. It's about the quiet moments that change lives long before anyone else notices. While Marcus was searching for himself hundreds of miles away, the people he loved were learning how to live without him. And nowhere was that more heartbreaking than inside the little house he had once called home. While Marcus was trying to understand his own silence, life in Madison did not stop. It couldn't. Bills still arrived. School mornings still came. Dinner still had to be cooked. Children still needed to be reassured. The world has a quiet cruelty. It keeps moving, even when someone's heart has stopped keeping pace. Diane Reed never had the luxury of falling apart. She was too busy keeping someone else together. The morning she found Marcus's note, she read it once, then she read it again. 11 words, that was all. No address, no explanation. No promise to return. Only an apology and a question she had never been given the chance to answer. She stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then she folded the note, placed it carefully inside a drawer, picked up her phone, and started making decisions. She called work. She called Marcus's mother. She called the police. By the end of the first week, she had spoken to a lawyer. By the second, she had changed the locks. Not because she hated Marcus, because she had a daughter who needed to feel safe inside her own home. People often imagine strength as something loud, something dramatic. Diane's strength was quieter than that. She got Lily ready for school every morning, packed lunches, worked 12-hour hospital shifts, came home exhausted, then somehow found enough energy to sit beside her daughter and ask, "How was your day?" Every single evening. There were nights she cried, just never where Lily could hear her, because children notice more than adults realize, and Diane refused to let Marcus's decision become Lily's burden. Every day, she repeated the same sentence, "None of this is your fault," again and again, until she wasn't sure whether she was convincing Lily or herself. Lily changed too, not all at once, quietly. She laughed a little less. She stopped bringing crayons to the kitchen table while her mother cooked. She started looking toward the front door whenever a car slowed outside, only for a second. Then she'd look away, as though she had already taught herself not to expect anything. Children rarely ask the biggest questions out loud. Sometimes, they simply stop asking. Cooper noticed the change before anyone else. For 4 months, he slept on Marcus's side of the bed, every night, waiting. Then one evening, without anyone calling him, he climbed onto the rug beside Lily's bed, and from that night forward, he slept there instead. Dogs don't understand abandonment. They only understand where someone is needed most. 15 months after Marcus Reed drove away, the phone finally rang. It was his mother. Marcus answered on the second ring. Something in Eleanor's voice was different. Not panic, not yet, but fragile, as though every word had been chosen before she spoke it. "Lily's been in an accident." Marcus stood so quickly his chair fell backwards. His heart stopped long before Eleanor finished the sentence. It was the school van. There was ice on the road. "They think she's going to be all right. She's awake. They're running more tests." Marcus was already reaching for his keys. He barely remembered locking the apartment door. The drive from Colorado to Wisconsin should have taken almost 18 hours. Marcus barely noticed the road. He stopped only for fuel, twice to wash his face in the restroom of a truck stop. Every 2 hours, he called his mother. Every time, she gave him the same answer. "Lily is stable. She's asking for her mom." Diane hasn't left her side. Marcus said very little. There was nothing left to say. The miles stretched endlessly ahead of him. For the first time since he left. He wasn't driving away from something, he was driving toward it, toward every conversation he had avoided, every silence he had hidden behind, every consequence waiting patiently for him to arrive. He reached Children's Hospital just before midnight. The parking garage was almost empty. Marcus turned off the engine, but he didn't get out. He sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the ticking sound of the cooling engine. It reminded him of another evening, another parked car, another driveway. Only this time, he wasn't afraid of going home. He was afraid of what home might have become without him. 10 minutes passed. Then Marcus picked up the small walnut box from the passenger seat, the one he had built for Lily, the one he had carried across 3 states. He held it for a moment, then walked toward the hospital entrance. Inside, everything smelled of antiseptic. Bright white lights, quiet voices, the soft rhythm of distant monitors. Marcus stopped the moment he saw Diane. She was sitting alone in the waiting room, still wearing her hospital scrubs beneath a winter coat. She looked exhausted, not angry, not surprised, simply tired. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Some conversations happen without words. This was one of them. Diane looked at him for a long moment, then quietly said, "She's sleeping. The doctors expect a full recovery. You can see her in the morning." That was all. No accusations, no tears, no questions, just simple facts. Marcus nodded. His voice barely worked. "Thank you." Diane stood, turned toward the hallway, paused for only a second, then disappeared through the doors leading to Lily's room. Marcus sat down alone. The waiting room was almost silent. A vending machine hummed softly in the corner. Somewhere down the corridor, a child laughed. Someone else cried. Life continued around him, completely unaware that a man was watching his own decisions arrive, one after another. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the 4-page letter he had carried since the morning he left. He read every word again, slowly. The pain inside those pages was real. The confusion was real. The loneliness was real. But for the first time, Marcus could also see something else. Every page explained why he had left. Not one page explained why he hadn't asked for help. That realization hurt more than anything he had written. Just before dawn, Marcus folded the pages one final time, walked to the trash can beside the waiting room door, and let them go. Not because they didn't matter, because he no longer needed excuses. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight crept through the hospital windows. A nurse smiled gently as she approached. "You can come in now." Marcus stood. His legs felt heavier than they ever had. He followed her down the hallway. Diane was already inside. She looked at him, then stepped aside. She didn't have to. She chose to. Marcus walked slowly toward the bed. Lily looked up. A small bandage rested above her eyebrow. She was eating green gelatin with complete concentration. Children have a remarkable way of making ordinary things feel important. She looked at Marcus, blinking once, almost as though she wanted to be certain he was real. Then she smiled. "Just a little. You came back." 3 words, nothing more. Marcus felt something inside him break. Not from guilt, from love. The kind of love that survives disappointment. The kind children somehow carry without understanding how. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, wrapped one arm around his daughter. She leaned against him without hesitation, then quietly returned to her green gelatin. As though the waiting was finally over, Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time in 15 months, he understood exactly what he had been searching for. It had never been waiting in another city. It had never been hidden inside freedom. It had never been waiting beyond another highway. It had always been here, inside ordinary mornings, inside kitchen conversations, inside bedtime stories, inside scraped knees, inside soccer games, inside this small hospital room, where a little girl leaned against her father as though he still belonged there, not because he deserved it, because she loved him. Walking back into Lily's life was the easiest part. Earning the right to stay would become the work of every single day that followed. Some stories end with forgiveness. This one didn't. Not in the way people usually expect. Marcus moved back to Madison 3 weeks after Lily left the hospital. He didn't return to the family home. That wasn't his place anymore. Instead, he rented a small apartment less than 10 minutes away. Close enough to be present, far enough to respect the life Diane had rebuilt. He never asked to move back in, not once, because he finally understood something he hadn't understood 15 months earlier. Trust is not given back because someone returns. It is rebuilt, one ordinary day at a time. Marcus started showing up, not with speeches, not with promises, with consistency. He was there for soccer practice, school concerts, parent-teacher meetings, dentist appointments, Saturday breakfasts, homework at the kitchen table, the ordinary moments, the moments he used to believe didn't matter. Now, he understood they were the whole point. In March, Marcus walked into a therapist's office for the first time. He sat down. looked at the floor for several seconds, then quietly said, "I left my family because I forgot who I was. I need to make sure I never become that man again." The therapist nodded. "Then let's begin there." Healing was not dramatic. It wasn't made of breakthroughs. It was made of uncomfortable conversations, difficult questions, long silences, and the slow work of learning that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the beginning of honesty. Months later, Marcus finished the small walnut box he had started in Colorado. He sanded every edge twice, added soft felt to the bottom, rubbed natural oil into the wood until it glowed. On Lily's 10th birthday, he handed it to her. She smiled, opened the lid, ran her fingers across the smooth wood. She didn't ask why it had taken so long. Children rarely measure love by calendars, only by presents. Years later, the box still sat on her dresser. Inside, she kept the things she couldn't bear to lose. A friendship bracelet, a faded photograph of Cooper, a birthday card from her grandmother, a small seashell from a family vacation. Tiny reminders that the things worth keeping are almost never expensive. Marcus and Diane never remarried. Not each other, not anyone else. Some people hear that and assume the story is sad. It isn't. It is simply honest. Their marriage ended. But their family didn't. Over time, they became something neither of them imagined possible. Good parents, reliable partners in raising Lily, two people who learned that respect can survive even when love changes its shape. Marcus still builds furniture on weekends, not because woodworking fixed him. Nothing fixes a person, but creating something carefully reminds him that broken things are not always thrown away. Sometimes they are rebuilt. His mother, Eleanor, still calls every other Thursday. Sometimes they talk about the weather. Sometimes they don't talk much at all. She never stopped answering the phone, and Marcus never stopped being grateful that she hadn't. Years later, someone asked Marcus what finally changed him. He thought for a long time before answering. Then he smiled sadly. It wasn't the hospital. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't losing my marriage. It was realizing that everything I was searching for had been waiting for me at my own dinner table. There are people who spend their entire lives chasing extraordinary moments. New cities, new careers, new relationships, new beginnings. Sometimes those journeys are necessary. Sometimes they save lives. But sometimes the life you're searching for is already quietly waiting inside the ordinary one you've stopped noticing. A child asking you to watch a drawing, a spouse waiting for you to tell the truth, a dog sleeping beside the front door, a kitchen light left on because someone expects you home. Marcus spent 2 years learning something that took only one sentence to say. The life he left was the life he wanted. He just realized it, too late to keep it unchanged. Not every ending is about getting back what was lost. Sometimes it's about becoming the kind of person who never loses it again. If this story stayed with you, don't tell me whether Marcus deserved forgiveness. Tell me something harder. At what moment do you think he could still have changed the outcome? Was it the driveway? The conversations with Diane? The note? Or was it long before any of those? I genuinely love to read your thoughts. And if stories like this are the kind you carry with you long after the screen goes dark, subscribe to Digital Shadows, because every week we tell stories about ordinary decisions and the extraordinary consequences they leave behind. There's another story I've been waiting to tell. It's about someone who never left, someone who stayed, who did everything right, who fought for the people she loved until there was nothing left of herself. It's proof that leaving isn't always something you do with your feet. Sometimes people disappear without ever walking out the front door. We'll tell that story next. Until then, thank you for listening.